third phase builds on these first two: mindset, entrance. And as you recall, we are working through the memory word message, where the next word is S for share ownership, and then moving towards a complete switch of ownership. This phase is all about the transfer of ownership from the teacher or the trainer to the student or the learner. In the British comedy movie, the film Monty, there's a scene where the teacher is ineffectively trying to choreograph a simple dance routine. The dance coach loses his temper and looks like he's about to give up in despair. Then one of the learners, reflecting, likens the move to a common football strategy, which he calls the Arsenal offside trap. This use of an analogy captures the imagination of the rest of the learners, and they execute the dance move perfectly once they think of it as a football tactic. My point here is that there was a sharing and then a switching of ownership. The moment the learners put the content into their own words, their motivation and engagement levels became higher. How can we achieve this in our training delivery? Well, the rule is simple. Anything a learner has to mentally process begins that transfer of ownership. In an age of multiple processors, our minds can be said to run on an intelligent septian processor, a sevenfold processor. It's as if we have 7 core processors that help us understand how something is relevant for us. The information comes in through our senses, but it still may not be comprehensible. This phase is where we grasp the relevance for ourselves. There are 7 ways we process and thus own new learning. Logic and reason. When we think about the logical flow of information or an ideal through to its conclusion, we're using this processor. So let's call it our logic processor. The language processor. This is where we take information that has been presented to us and we reword it in our own terms, as in the movie. 3D processor. Almost a graphics card for the brain, where learners make visual links between ideas and information and outputs. Think flowcharts and mind maps. Tactile processor. This is learning by redoing. At the entrance phase, we may learn by having a hands-on demonstration. And this is then the natural next development, where the learner has a go for themselves and then learns from their successes and their mistakes. Equally vital. Social processor, integrating the learning by dialogue or debate, asking for help and clarification. Reflective processor, taking time out to reflect on how the learning could be relevant for their perceived needs and applications. That eureka moment when they go, yes, aha. Musical processor, my favourite, almost the sound card of the brain, where music is given an associative meaning to link to the learning. Consider how, for example, many adverts depend upon the association between a great piece of music that they know you're going to love and a great product. Now you might be thinking that the social, reflective, tactile, language and 3D processors seem very similar to the frame and format concepts we met during the entrance phase. And you'd be exactly right. But there is one major difference. The main difference is in the who is doing the doing. When conveying fresh information during the entrance phase, the process is trainer or teacher driven. You decide how to layer the senses. You decide when there will be a discussion or a time for reflection. You decide when to provide detail and when to build the relationships between the learners and the value of the content. During the share and then switch ownership phase, it's all learner driven. They decide how they want to process the content and thus master it for themselves. Your job is to provide the opportunity. In practice, this means providing a range of activities for the learners to choose from in order to deeply understand and apply the core learning for themselves. Let's give you some examples. If you get them to work through the reasons a pattern of keystrokes will work in a software package and why another set of commands won't work, they have to be integrating the learning using the logic processor. If you let them write out their own set of instructions for certain key features or applications, they will be activating their language processor. If you get them to chart or map out how systems work, they must be applying and activating their 3D graphics processor. If you get them to discuss applications with other learners or ask questions, they will be using their social processor. If you give them time to reflect before describing the importance of an application to them personally, you will be encouraging the use of the reflective processor. And if you ask them to associate their learning with a song or a playlist, they will have launched their musical processor.